brilliant. Thank you for that.
Welcome.
Thank you.
It's great to see you,
It's good to see you both.
Gosh, I
Fabulous.
love you. I actually love you. I actually love you. You may need a cease and desist order put on me. I think you're amazing. You know I think you're amazing, don't you?
Oh, listen.
This book is so good, Sue.
It's been fun to do.
Oh, God, it's fun to read. It just made me want to watch every documentary that you mentioned in the book and other documentaries too, reminding me of my childhood. You know, there was Beatlemania in the 60s, which I don't really remember. I remember hearing a few Beatles songs on the radio back in the day in period because I was like 3 or 4. But I do remember Borg Mania. Tell us about Borg Mania.
Borg Mania. Well, same age as me, 17. He came onto the scene in the boycott year. Yeah. So a lot of the top players had boycotted. So all the press were looking for what's the story now for Wimbledon. Yeah. And he turned up like a rock star with his long hair, the bandana, the quiet Swede, and the way he played. And the girls went nuts for him. I remember we was always in the ladies' locker room watching down when the car arrived. And it was in the days when the cars came through Wimbledon and the crowds just swarmed over the car. He was bothered everywhere he went. And talking to him, he was very superstitious, off court, not on it, but off court. He wanted the same hotel, the same route to get to Wimbledon, so everyone knew which way he was going, where he was staying. 200 girls screaming outside his bedroom window every night of the championship. Thousands, and they used to invade centre court and mob him.
He was
amazing.
Reading your book and looking at the great pictures in your book, and it's given me goosebumps now. Honestly, this book is fantastic, everyone. It's a great read. It'll make you so nostalgic, and so it'll make you feel so joyous. But looking back now in my mind's eye, it reminds me of Tiger Woods, actually. You know, because he's always surrounded. There was that kind of magnetism, that kind of gravitas to the situation. Yes. But they were writing the book for the first time.
Yes, yeah, and he didn't want the attention. He came this quiet Swede, didn't really want it, and it actually made him go away from the game. He said he couldn't fly anywhere, he couldn't do anything. Yeah. He felt like his whole life had been taken away from him, and he walked away from the game initially at 25, and then eventually at 26 years of age. I mean, when you look at Federer in his 40s, and Andy at 38 now, you suddenly think 26.
Yeah, and also he looked after himself, so he would have been able to carry on.
Yes, absolutely. And it robbed us of more matches with McEnroe because that rivalry was just fantastic, but it only really lasted a couple of years.
And maybe it was all the better for it, from a dramatic point of view. You always want what you can't have, or you often want what you can't have. And you describe him as a rock star, and I suppose he had rock star status, but he was, like you've also suggested, he was the least rock starry person. He was quite zen in a way.
He was so lovely, and McEnroe tells this wonderful story because Mac lost it with everybody. Yeah. He was ranting and raving against everyone, never did it against Borg. And I asked him, I said, why did that happen? And he said, well, there was a match in New Orleans, he said, and we were playing and I was going nuts, he said, because it was 5-all in the third set and I was ranting and raving. And all of a sudden I heard this, John. And he said, I turned around, there's Borg, gesturing, beckoning him to the net. And so John goes, what's going on? It's 5-all in the third. Bjrn said, John, why are you doing this? You don't need to do this. Yes. We're playing great tennis. Everyone's enjoying the match. You don't need to shout. And Mac was just flabbergasted and went back and they played out a great match. But, and then he realised, I don't need to do this against Bjorn. And he never did. He never lost it against Bjorn, but lost it against every other player.
That is a fascinating passage in the book because you actually recount verbatim what Bjrn Borg said to John McEnroe over the net. Yeah. And John McEnroe literally walked back to the baseline, didn't he, to serve. And he thought, at least somebody understands me.
Exactly.
And that's where it's been... And they became great mates.
Oh, they are the best of friends.
Other rivalries on court that ended up... And the players ended up being thick as thieves. I mean, we could fast forward. We go all over the place with the book. We could fast forward to Rafa Nadal and to Roger Federer.
Exactly. I mean, when Roger at the O2 decided to retire, I mean, I think Rafael Nadal was in tears more than Roger Federer was, because not only was it his
tears
great
of joy,
friend...
I don't have to play him anymore.
Yes, exactly, probably. But there just seemed to be so much respect and friendship, and they're all still in touch and still, I said to Roger, because I met him just last week, I did an event with him, and I said, do you think you'll ever hit a ball with Rafa on a private court somewhere? He said, no. He said, but we might go on the golf course. And I thought, wouldn't that be nice that they could still sort of just be friends and and go off and do other stuff.
Because I read the book word for word, every time you say something, there's like 1,000 questions. I'll get to the golf course in a minute. I'll get to Billie Jean King getting back on centre court and hitting some balls decades after she did it for the first time. I'll get on to how come she can still play tennis 3 times a week with all her mates, even though she's in her 80s. But let's stick with Roger Federer. So you're talking about great, people who you love. I sneakily think Mac is your favourite. We'll find out that in a minute. And games that you remember, and your greatest days at Wimbledon as a player, as a commentator, as a TV host, as an interviewer. Yeah, we can do all that, but I suppose we could drill right down into your favourite ever shot, and a contender for that may well be a Roger Federer shot, which was so good, so sublime, stayed with you so much, you couldn't wait to ask him about it. For as part of a documentary. So you asked him the question about this memorable shot, the shot of a lifetime, and he said...
He couldn't remember it, didn't have a clue what I was talking about. And I was there with Paul Davis, who's now the head of Wimbledon Broadcasting, who was the man on the buttons, who was doing the cameras that day. And he was there and he goes, "Don't you remember it, Roger? This little half volley cross court." I mean, Roddick had hit this massive thing. It was in a tie break and he was going to go down 2-0. And he'd hit this half volley, backhand across court. He said it was magnificent. Roger, don't remember it. But of course,
there were so
when
many.
you hit that many, yes. I mean, he's a genius. Like, oh, okay. So he went off to look at it online, he said.
Much of what we enjoy about Wimbledon now, you can put down to many trailblazers over the years. One of whom was Rod Laver. So just tell us about Rod Laver. Great picture of you, Rod Laver, and another person.
Ken Rosewall.
Yes. Jump in the net.
Jump in the net when I was 13.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you give us Rod Laver's story in a nutshell? Once again, if you want to read it all, it's in Sue's... It's a biography of Wimbledon. Sue Barker, Wimbledon, the place, the magic.
Well, I say for Rod, sort of gave me a bit of my tennis career, and Billie Jean, because Rod Laver, by going professional in 1962 when he had just won the Grand Slam, meant he couldn't play any of the slams, so missed Wimbledon for 5 years.
Because they were all amateur.
Because they had to be amateur and they wanted to turn professional, so this group turned professional. And then it was the chairman of Wimbledon said, "I want Laver," because Laver was like the hot topic, he was the best player by far. He said, "I want Laver to play at Wimbledon." So he made it happen. He had an exhibition event in 1967, so then Rod came back in 1968, and of course that's the time when I was 12 years old and just it was a hobby, and suddenly when it went pro, I was suddenly thinking this could be a career. It totally changed, and if Rod hadn't have speeded that up, I probably, if it had been 4 or 5 years later, because tennis was going to go professional, it was a case of when, but if it had been in 4 years' time, I probably would have missed it. But by going pro in 1968, I was off and running. So.
And he's still very much revered, isn't he? And he's been there. It was the opening of the roof or something, wasn't he?
Oh, God, yeah. Oh, he is just... He's such a legend. I went round to his house, and of course, he was the guy I used to watch, playing when I was a kid growing up. And then he starts taking me around his vegetable patch, and I'm having to pinch myself thinking, I'm here with Rod Laver talking about radishes and what he's growing, lettuces and all this sort of stuff. But no, he's an absolute legend, and he was one of them. And Billie Jean King obviously is the other. She WhatsApped me the other day because she's been my mentor all through my career, and she WhatsApped me and she goes, "Sue, I've got so much to tell you at Wimbledon, we've got to meet up." She said, "I've just started an ice hockey league for women in America, an ice hockey league." I'm going, "Crikey, Billie Jean." She said, "I want to catch up with all your news." So I thought, right, okay. Well, I said, she's doing an ice hockey league. I'm worrying about where I'm going to walk my dog at 4 o'clock.
But you've written this book. Hang on a minute, Sue. Come on. I mean, she's not a co-author, but if there was one, because you very much authored this yourself, but she does get more mentions than anybody else in the book, doesn't she? She changed my life. Give us a few Billie Jean headlines.
Well, Billie Jean, the very first time I met her, she sat me down with some other juniors when we were just first on the tour when I was 15, and she basically said, "Women's tennis, you've got to sell it. You are the next generation, and you are going to set the standard for the generation to come. Any interviewer that comes up to ask you for an interview, you say, yes, what time and where. You've got to sell it. You've got to go out and promote women's tennis." And that's what she's always done. And nowadays you're begging for interviews. You're sort of, please will you come and do an interview? But back then, she was brave enough to take women's tennis away from work with the men. But I just last year we went and had coffee together in her flat and just talked all things tennis. She's just brilliant. She's just been an absolute mentor for me all through. Even when I was leaving the BBC, I went straight to her about is this the right decision for me, Billie? And she just talked. She's just so wise and so.
Wrong decision for the viewers. Anyway, we'll march on Downing Street another day for that one. They're pretty busy at the moment. You're talking about interviews in the book. You do allude to the fact that you were nervous to the point of wanting to be sick before those on-court interviews, which everything you do at Wimbledon, everything you did at Wimbledon was 10 out of 10. What do I know? I've been doing this bit for a while, you've been doing that bit for a while. We sort of, there's some common ground there. But I mean, I interview people for a living, you've interviewed people for a living. The way those interviews came across on court, the ease at which you interviewed people, the leanness of the conversation, the brevity and conciseness, but the complexity and comprehensive aspect of the questions, you are the perfect interviewer. How the heck could you possibly have been nervous when you were so good at that aspect of your job? I get it and I don't get it.
It's very kind of you to say that, but I mean, having been in that situation, knowing what it's like to lose a match, but particularly a Grand Slam final, I can't even imagine what that's like. To actually put a microphone under someone who's lost, that's really difficult. And then the other person's so elated they don't really know what's going on. Yeah. I remember the very first time when they brought them in the early 2000s, I had to walk onto court and I was really nervous, and my producer in my ear, Martin Hopkins, suddenly said, Sue Barker walking out, Jess, the estimated 500 million people watching you right now, good luck. That wasn't the best thing to say as I was wandering out with my microphone.
Because your biography, which you came in to talk about, was brilliant. This is different, though, isn't it? Because it's not about you. There's a lightness to it, isn't there?
Yeah.
I loved your other book. I did, because we talked about it, and I really genuinely did love it. Yeah. It's different, though, isn't it? It's so different because it's just far enough away from not actually being you that you can sort of play with it.
Yes, exactly. I mean? And had so many funny things that happen at Wimbledon, over the years as well.
It's not like After Dinner Doll. This is a great book. Sue Barker, Wimbledon, the place, the magic of personal history. Some after dinner speakers are great, but it can be quite sort of perfunctory. This is anything but that. I love the Martina Navratilova chapter because I love her. Yeah. I love her. Now, that was a struggle for her, wasn't it?
Oh, my word. Well, I was lucky enough to do her documentary for the BBC. And again, we're the same age. We grew up together. I remember the first time I ever saw her. She didn't speak any English. I certainly didn't speak any Czech. And we were playing on adjacent courts, but we'd heard about each other, so we were looking at each other. And I remember seeing her, this wonderful lefty serve and great athlete coming in, and I thought, oh, God. I'm thinking, what? Good luck.
It's Chrissy Ever,
Martina, I've got no chance.
Give it a rest,
no chance. But what she had to do, and her stepfather encouraged her to leave Czechoslovakia when the war was happening, and to go over to America and defect, and to leave her mum, who she was so close to and didn't even get to say goodbye because she couldn't say goodbye because her mother would have wanted her to stay, to make that decision to go when you're just a teenager, and then to win your first Wimbledon in 1978, not have any family there. And apparently in what was then Czechoslovakia, they didn't even report that she was winning the tournament. They only showed Chrissy matches. They never showed Martina.
They stopped broadcasting.
Yeah. It was just, and it was wonderful that the Duchess of Kent came in and made it happen that her mother could come and watch her win it the year after. Yeah. But you suddenly think, crikey, I thought, I left my family home when I was 17 to go and live in America, California.
Sacrifice.
I was like,
no, it isn't.
I was like, yes, I'm going off to California. I could pop back and see my family whenever I wanted. To not be able to have any contact with them. And, telephones you couldn't get in at that time. Yeah. She was an amazing player.
Another couple you remind us of is Jimmy Connors and Chrissy Ever.
Yes.
She was a toughie, wasn't she?
Oh, she was the toughest player I ever played, and just the way she played the game was just incredible. But watching her when she came first onto the scene, made the semi-finals when she was just 17 years of age at Wimbledon, and of course coming the next year with Jimmy and being engaged and all that. I mean, she talks about it quite openly that she didn't like that attention, and she didn't like that being in the limelight.
He was a cool dude, wasn't he?
He was a cool dude. You see, I'm talking to McEnroe and Connors. I mean, some of the funniest interviews I ever did was with those two in the studio when it was raining, because they didn't like each other. They had opposite opinions of everything, and that is an interviewer's dream, isn't it? Just fire one little question and just watch it going back and forth, but like a little tennis match.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? Because that's an interviewer's dream, and the whole back to McEnroe and Borg. because they were so different. I mean, you couldn't write it, could you?
No.
They had this massive mutual appreciation and respect for each other, but they played the game differently. They lived life differently.
Yeah.
They were from completely different cultures. One was slightly older than the other one, and that was. That's what sport. That's when sport is unmissable, isn't it?
Exactly.
You can't take your eyes off it.
No.
And it's it's what tennis needs now. I wonder where that's going to come from next.
Yeah.
Interesting. Let's talk about Pete Sampras and Andre Agassi, because it wasn't dissimilar there.
No. And Agassi, I mean, that was such a sad story. When I first saw him, I felt like he was like Borg. When he came in with the long hair and the denim shorts he had and all the stuff,
dude.
and another cool
Happy
dude.
in his own skin.
Oh, we just thought magnificent to read his autobiography and hear how much he hated tennis. I feel that really is
whilst he was at Wimbledon.
So sad.
And resistant to playing there in the first place because of the dress code.
Yeah, didn't want to do it.
Or was it that?
Well,
do you know what I mean?
Yes, now you question now, because none of us realised all of that was going on, and wearing the hairpiece, and all that. I mean, none of us knew anything, and it's wonderful that now with Steffi, now happily married with a family. I mean, it's and he's now embracing tennis again. Yeah. It's just such a shame that someone, and you look at the people like Borg, like Agassi, some of these young players that get fame so early, they can't deal with it. It's
the
really
whole
difficult.
Andre Agassi's story is amazing. I still haven't read his book. I presume you have.
Unbelievable.
I know. I've got to read it. I've got to read that book. I want to reread Mac's book as well. But I want to read Andre Agassi's book. And
it's sad though. It makes you feel like I wish he'd loved tennis. He didn't. His father pushed him too much. It was just, and you can sort of see that now. That troubled sort of.
But he wouldn't have met Steffi.
Exactly.
Life's life.
Yeah.
That's the way it is, and we're all where we're meant to be, and we're all exactly here because of everything that's happened to us before. Good, bad, very good, very bad. Sometimes mixture of both. I can't believe how many stories you get in the book, because you also tell the story, the fact that Andre wanted to go to the champions' dinner because he knew that the male champion and the female champion always have the first dance, and he really fancied Steffi Graf. He thought, hang on a minute, I get to dance with her.
Yes, exactly.
And look, I mean, some kind of blind date. Do you know what I mean?
Couldn't be better, could it? And he was so excited to win it. And then he gets to the ball, and it's the first year they've decided they're not going to have the first dance. He was like, oh no! But at least he got to have pictures taken next to Steffi. But the rest is history. But he would talk about a motivation to win the final.
Brilliant. He said he thought about that in the match, didn't he?
Yes.
So I've got to win this game because I need to dance with that woman.
Yes.
Because I want to marry her. It's a great story, isn't it? It's a great story. Yeah. The Williams sisters, of course, they get their chapter as well. You start with Billie Jean King. Yeah. Without Billie Jean King, you sort of don't get the Williams sisters.
Absolutely not. And I had a lovely story with Venus when I was her first title that she won was in 2000. She'd beaten Lindsay Davenport, and I, tried to dress up for the final, look as smart as I could, and I'd spent a lot of money on some very posh shoes, and I'm walking out. So I'm standing there with my microphone, and Venus is jumping up and down. She's won her first Wimbledon, and she's a real fashionista. She used to walk around in this lovely white sort of all onesie thing that made her look like a model. She was amazing. And so she's walking over to me with the trophy like that, and she looks me up and down, and she goes, "Great shoes, Sue." And I was like, whoa, she's just won Wimbledon, and now to the estimated 500 million, she's talking about how wonderful my shoes are. And I interviewed her for 4 more Wimbledon wins. She never mentioned another part of my wardrobe. So I peaked in 2000 and failed after that.
It's funny, isn't it, how those brief exchanges can mean so much more than other longer-term relationships. Like, for example, your brief encounter with Princess Diana. Oh,
you see, that was the thing. Having not won Wimbledon in 1977, I used to get so jealous when Virginia Wade was saying, "Oh, sorry, sir, I've just got to go and have tea with Princess Diana in the royal box," and all this. And I was like, if only I'd won in 77, I could be, because I thought she was amazing. And this went on for year after year after year. And one time I was coming up the stairs when I probably shouldn't be, and coming down from the royal box was Princess Diana, and I just froze and went up against the wall like, trying to be, invisible.
And she's like the most famous woman in the world at the time.
And she's skipping down the stairs like that. And she goes, "Oh, hello, Sue, how are you?" Like that. I was like, she knows who I am. I was
Of course she does. You're Sue Barker. She's at Wimbledon. Everybody knows who you are. You've seen him come and go. You've counted him in and you've counted him out again. But you've always been there, Sue.
I was just, that was it. It made me.
What about like if we go into the world of fiction, right? And you had won more than you did, and you're a very successful tennis player, but you wouldn't have had the career that you've had, and you wouldn't have seen all the players come and go, because you would have had your time, and then you'd have done whatever you do post-career. Maybe you'd have done this anyway, so you could have had the best of both worlds. But in a way...
I know. Look, it gave me the most wonderful career, which I wouldn't have needed. I remember walking around Central Park when I was doing a doc, talking to Virginia, yet again reminiscing about my failure and her triumph, and rubbing it in yet again.
This is as bitter as Barker gets, by the way. She can do better if she tries hard enough.
Every time I joined the Beeb, it was the 20th anniversary, the 25th anniversary, the 30th.
Everyone.
I've done it, But we were walking around Central Park, and I said, "Do you think your life changed, Virginia, after winning Wimbledon?" She goes, "No, I don't think so." And so that we went for lunch together, and we're sitting there, and she said, "Oh, look, Sue, if you and your husband ever want to pop over, we've got a place in Barbados if you want to use it." I said, "Oh, that's great," like that. She goes, I said, "Where are you living now? Still in New York?" She said, "Oh, we've still got that, but we're moving out to so-and-so." And I said, "And I've still got the place in London and the other." I'm going, "Oh, your life didn't change at all then, did it?"
Yeah, I know, it's funny. They
like...
say that's the difference between first and second.
Exactly.
I think Steve Ovett has a very similar story about Sebastian Coe. Very similar story. It's to do with the length of a drive, I think. Something like that.
But no, I wouldn't have had the career, you're right, because I probably would have made enough money that I probably wouldn't have needed to, whereas when I quit at 30 it was like, I've got to do something, I've got to find something. And of course I went to the BBC and I asked, could I be a commentator? And they looked at me and said, "No, we've got Anne Jones and Virginia Wade who both won Wimbledon, so I'm afraid..."
Not again, stop it!
Stop
BBC
it! Yes, it was
people.
like, I'm afraid, you can't. So I had to find a different way to... different door to enter, really.
And a sort of a beautiful chapter is Wimbledon 2023, when you attend as a normie on Civvy Street.
It was fabulous.
So tell us about that.
I was dreading it in a way, because I thought, am I really going to miss it? What's it going to be like? And I miss a lot of it. I miss the people and I miss the buzz, but I don't miss the hours.
Accept and surrender to the fact that you miss them and not try to pretend you don't.
No, oh God, no. I miss the fun of the job and the adrenaline and all of that. But the hours, that was tough. But just walking through the gates, and my husband and I went and queued up for a hot dog and went and sat on court 15, because I love at Wimbledon watching the two players that are really closely in the rankings, fighting it out in a tough 3-set or 5-set battle. On centre court, it's always straight set, early on. But to watch these two kids, battling it out for their sort of ticket home and all that sort of stuff.
And in
was
the blink
just
of an
fantastic.
eye, it was you.
Yes, yeah. There you go. That's how I started. Do you know, it was like I was at Wimbledon yesterday and I was having lunch and these two American girls from Los Angeles came in. They're in the junior event playing at Wimbledon this year. First time ever at Wimbledon. They got 2 members to get them in as guests so that they could come and just experience Wimbledon, and I met them at lunch and they were just like, "This has inspired me." And I said, that's what happened to me. When I walked through those gates when I was 13, I said, I want to be back here. I want to come in with a competitor's badge. And they said, "We've been invited to the junior event." Said, "We want to come back as competitors." This has absolutely inspired us, and Wimbledon just continues to just do that.
Well, if you want a cracking read this summer, this book is so good. Sue Barker, Wimbledon, The Players, the Place, the Magic of Personal History. The thing about our Sue, she just is Wimbledon, says John McEnroe. I'm guessing he's your favourite. He is he's so interesting. I went to New York. I went to his home, met his lovely family. Yeah. He took me down his art gallery. He's had the most incredible life. Yeah. And he's
just
fascinating, isn't
and
he?
he is just amazing to talk to, and also again a challenge to interview. You never know where he's going. We try and write a running order about what we might need, and he goes
still
off
now.
He goes off at all these tangents. You never know where he's going in the conversation. But I love love
been
that.
to my house, Sue, but you're very welcome. And if you come to my house, Faster's been there. If you come into my house, the first thing you see is a massive, massive photograph of John McEnroe smoking a big fat cigar in a denim jacket. It's a Brian Harris photo. You know Brian Harris, the photographer?
Yes.
And he did this. There was this Times profile on him, and I just saw this photograph of John McEnroe. I thought, I really like him. I really like the look of that photograph. It's a bit like a sort of modern day version of the famous Michael Caine, David Bailey photograph. And it's the first thing you see when you walk into my house. So I'm a big fan too.
Yeah.
Sue, we're out of time.
Oh, it's been lovely. Thank you so much.
You're welcome back anytime you like.
Thank you very much.